You were a big highlight for me last year at the AuthorCon in Williamsburg, Virginia. Getting to chat with you as well. Your passion is absolutely infectious. You write fantastic books. I was able to grab off of you last time, and I was kind of sad. I was a little bit heartbroken when you weren't there this past year. But then I talked to your buddy, who also happens to be a executive producer on the project that we're here to talk about, Dead Format, because you were busy putting this sucker together and getting ready to jump into the insanity that is crowdfunding. So we can start there. What is it you're working on? What was it you're busy doing when we're all lamenting over your absence from AuthorCon?
Well, so part of the reason I wasn't at AuthorCon is because I am quite infectious. So the CDC barred me from travel, but I think there's a vaccine now. Very low death count, really. Like most, there's at least a 50% survival rate with people that encounter me. So, it's going up.
Good.
But yeah, so I couldn't make the AuthorCon, unfortunately, because we are in the middle of making a new movie, Dead Format, which you had just said. So we just launched our crowdfunder. It's my second feature film. The first being I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday. Obviously, the delightful comedic romp about a family starving to death in a bomb shelter after the end of the world. Told that it's a movie that they should hand out Prozac and handguns after.
Real
I don't
family
know how I feel
film.
about that, but sure.
Yeah, it's depressing, man. It's fantastic. Like you wanna cry, but then you're embracing the thing while you're doing it.
It's ask my ex-girlfriend.
Exactly. It's like I hate the experience, but I love it. Yeah, no, it's awesome stuff. So no, I'm really excited that you're doing that. So now, are you just kind of going through all these stories then? Is this going to be like the next wave of Clive Barker Books of Blood films? Are you following his tracks and doing the books of Don't Tap the Glass?
I mean, I would love to say that. There's a key difference between the two, though. Is Clive Barker is a good writer and is a god of horror. No, I would love to adapt not all of the stories in that book. I don't think some of them should be adapted for various reasons, but Dead Format is definitely the fan favorite out of the collection, so I'm very excited that's the next project. White Doomsday obviously began life in that book as well. The only other one I'd really love to shoot, honestly, would be Weekend at Escobar's, although I feel like that is actually the one story that I almost feel like I would rather give to somebody else to direct because it's so out of my wheelhouse. At least the crime stuff is. So anyone who hasn't read it, it's like a story about like a Colombian drug cartel delivery that goes kind of wrong and all sorts of bad stuff happens. And it has the really personal, dark stuff that I like to do. And then it gets incredibly graphic and dark at the end and sad. So that's definitely my jam. But all the other stuff, very outside of my comfort zone to write that. So I don't know that I'd really be able to do that part of the story justice in film, but I would love to see someone else take a crack at it. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and it's I mean, it's got that. There's the one scene I remember from that story in particular. It had sort of a bit of an 8mm vibe going on.
Oh, yeah, there's there's that scene. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I would be open to doing a couple other stories out of the book, maybe eventually. But I do have hopefully the third feature that I will be directing. I have that one already figured out, and that is Masterwork, which is it sounds really, really full of myself to call a movie that, but that's part of the joke. But that's something I've been planning out for literally 15 years. But that's a whole nother podcast right there. So maybe one day, eventually, you guys will get to see me make a movie about somebody destroying their life trying to make a movie, which is what Masterwork is about. But until then, we're going to make Dead Format, and I can just destroy my actual life making that instead right now.
That's what I was thinking. I'm hoping this movie about destroying your life, making a movie, isn't what's going to be somebody following you around with a handy cam, and that's just going to be the bonus feature.
Yeah, well, they did that already.
Yeah,
that was called The Brilliant Terror. It's a documentary I started, and they pretty much did do that for about 10 years.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, and it's funny too. Like I was watching, I won't say his name, but one of the gentlemen that I met, another filmmaker at the AuthorCon actually this past year, was showing me a video of essentially a burning a vehicle gone horribly wrong to the point where the vehicle all but exploded. And I remember talking to him saying, see, this is the stuff I love, this behind the scenes look, because I'm absolutely fascinated about the worst day in the life of filmmakers. And I feel kind of twisted and sick about that, but it's what gets me up in the mornings.
Now, same. I mean, I love hearing war stories from other filmmakers, and the running joke always is like, if people say, you know, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you on set, and I'll say, I got there.
Yeah.
Because it's always terrible, but then you have this internal like revisionist history where you think, man, that was a lot of fun, you know, 5 years later, and then you get back into it like, oh my god, I said I'd never do this again. But you always end up coming back, and that's what masterwork is about, pretty much. It's just that delightful love-hate relationship with it, and I do love it. I mean, if you don't love it, then there's no reason to do it, because you're certainly not going to make any money. So
right,
there's a million reasons not to make a movie, and there's only one good one to make a movie, and that is because you love it.
Yep, and you just have to do it, and then I guess it just becomes you know, an experience of survival. And resilience, and knowing what you can put yourself through, and knowing that if it goes horribly wrong again and you have the second worst day of your life, at least you're like, well, I got to the last one, so maybe this time will be just as good or better. And then
there are fun stories to tell later, you know. So
absolutely,
it's been 7 years since I made White Doomsday, and I've almost forgotten all of the trauma. So I'm like, yeah, this would be great. My producer's like, you say that now. I'm like, I know. It's fine.
Yeah, it's flashbacks fine. Are a bitch though, aren't they?
Absolutely. I still wake up. For some of us, the war never ended, you know?
So speaking of which then, so I understand one of the fascinating things that I love about this, and I'm guessing this is a big reason why the obvious answer, the answer to a question that I thought of previously was why this movie, why now to make it? But this has been firmly in your head for about the last, 7 or 8 years, I understand, to the point where you started getting set pieces about 7 years ago, I recall you saying.
Yeah, so Dead Format was actually, I wrote the short story back in 2017, 16, I want to say, something like that. I can't remember exactly when. It was originally inspired by a couple things, but one of the big ones was my grandmother passed away, and my mom had a videotape, a home movie of my grandparents getting their marriage vows renewed at that. Then they did that at the home that I grew up in. So we filmed it, and I found this tape, and I was going to digitize it for my mom so she could play parts of it at the funeral. And I put it on, and I saw my dad, who had recently passed away at the time as well. I saw cousins that were gone, uncles, aunts, like me as a child. Like, I saw all these family members that had been gone for years, and seeing my childhood home that I hadn't seen in forever, and just revisiting all of that stuff was just this emotional tidal wave that just destroyed me, to be perfectly honest. And then I just kept thinking, it's like, you know, if this tape didn't exist, if we didn't literally rent a camcorder, because now, you know, we're living in a time where every moment of our life is on video, and if in the future, like, if someone wants to know what it was like to live in 2024, they could pull up this interview. They could literally see moment by moment what life was like. But, you know, we have to think, like, what was it like in the 30s? Like, we have some grainy photographs, and that's about it. And even back in the 90s, the early 90s, the 80s, it was such a big deal to record home video, even though it was easier than doing it on like Super 8 like they used to. But it's such an artifact, you know, to have these things, and it was so special. And it's like, I felt like it ties into my weird, like, artistic philosophy of that all we're really trying to do as artists is just to scratch our name on the wall of infinity, to leave some kind of graffiti that I was here. And having a photograph, having this video, it's some kind of immortality, because there will come a time where without that video, enough generations will go by that nobody will even know that part of my family existed. There'll be nobody left to remember. And that is another crushing thing. This is what I think about all day. I'm a real cheery guy. But this video, it's like, this was this valuable, like, artifact of the past, and I could see that. It's just this beautiful, like, frozen, it's not even a frozen moment in time like a photograph. It's like you literally are time traveling. And that mixed with me dealing with the grief of my dad passing away, and mourning the death of physical media and like the video store culture that I grew up in and all that stuff, like it all just morphed together into this really, I apologize, I just ate, so I'm
That's okay.
um just this weird ball of anxiety and grief. And then I came up with the ending of the story, which at the time I thought was really funny. And then it got really, then when I went to actually write and then I'm not going to spoil what the end is, but the things leading up to the final moments I thought were hilarious. And then I wrote the story, and then I was just like, oh my God, I'm crying. What is happening right now? And then I sent the story out to pre-readers, and that was the feedback. Everyone's like, this just destroyed me. And it just turned into this really, really personal, emotional thing. And that's been percolating for so long. And everyone kept saying, dude, you got to make this into a movie. You got to make this into a movie. And I'm like, it's a short film at best. And that was the plan. I was going to make a short film, just like Once Upon a Time I said White Doomsday was going to be a short film. And then, flash forward, I'm like, oh, wow, we shot, we have like 40 minutes of movie here, and we're only halfway through the script. That's not good. So we accidentally made a feature. So, everyone kept yelling at me over the years, like, make it a feature. And then finally, my producers, Brian Keane, Samantha Koliesnik, and Nathan Ludwig, they finally convinced me that I had a feature. When they read the script, they're like, dude, this is paced like a feature. Like, you can't make this into a short film. And I read it, and I was like, son of a bitch, you're right. So I begrudgingly listened to them, and here we are.
Excellent. Well, I'm very glad that you've listened to them. So I do want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like, the difference between getting paid by some production company or finding finance in producers that ultimately are kind of like your boss, I guess, in a sense, versus doing all that, but with people that are close to you and friends. But before I ask you that, with this particular story, now you obviously touched on a little bit of as far as, how it's personalized for you, certainly the seed of it all. And I absolutely believe that's so fascinating, like you said, with how the whole movies absolutely capture a moment of time like no other before, until, of course, now we've got social media. Like I said, somebody wants to know, hey, I wonder what Mike and Rick were up to on this date, 120 years ago. They could do a couple of clicks, and here we are, hopefully. So it's fascinating. But what really was it that was very personal about you, or so personal about this particular story, that you had to write it from a collection of other stories that were quite profoundly personal? Certainly, I know the title story was very personal. It had to do with being in the hospital with your mom through some very, very trying times. To say the least. I'll let you describe it if you wish to. But compared to some of the other stories, what was it about this one where you absolutely just had to make this one?
I think so. The title story, Please Don't Tap on the Glass, was so White Doomsday. Well, you go back that far as that is.
Sure.
Was written. My mom had kidney failure and was in the ICU for many months, with like 4% kidney function. She fortunately fine now, which is why I talk about the story so lightly. But that was one of the worst experiences of my life. Was we thought every day this was it, and it came to me to kind of shield her from the reality of how bad things were. I was trying to keep her spirits up, and it was a weird role reversal because growing up, my dad was in a really horrible truck accident and was in a coma when I was a kid, and all sorts of bad stuff. My mom, I have 3 brothers. My mom was working 4 jobs and taking care of us, and we always had birthdays. We always had Christmas. No matter how cobbled together it was, it always existed. And I honestly had no idea how bad things were until I was an adult and I heard these stories, and it just floored me. It's like, holy shit, like, how did you survive and do that? And I realized, like, that's what parents do. And I found myself in my mid-20s basically taking on that role for her. And we had her birthday in the hospital, and it was a really, really awful time. And that's what White Doomsday is about, is this woman shielding her son from the reality of the fact that they are slowly starving to death and that their father is not coming home. And I always think that the truest test of someone's character is what they do in a no-win situation. And without getting too far into what Doomsday is, when your back's against the wall, how you choose to spend those final moments and what what you'll do for someone that you love, how much, to show them that you care about them, I think is so telling of the type of person you actually are. And that's really, it was a story about my mom. It's really what it was. And Dead Format is very much a story about my dad. And, after he passed away, I was dealing with that. And it's the story itself, I think it just lent itself to being a movie just because of the subject matter. The visuals were there, and it has, I tend to, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I tend to despite my overtly comedic personality a lot of the time, I tend to dwell in the dark spots in the world. One of the things that I like to explore is the death of the magic of childhood, the innocence being slowly eroded by the world, and when you find out that the universe has teeth. And that's very much what this story is about too. But I tend to dwell in the darker aspects of things. But this story, I felt like, was a nice mix of my old short films from Real Splatter that were mostly splatter comedy, like the goofier, more fun stuff, the more satirical shit I used to make, versus after the universe kicked me in the balls a bunch of times and I became a depressed sack of shit. I think this one is the middle ground between old Real Splatter and White Doomsday. Like, it's still very heavy and it's very dark, but it's got some comedy in it, and it's fun in spots. And I mean, nostalgia rules my life. It really does. And
Absolutely.
The video store, like, that meant so much to me growing up. Like, the person I am today is because I was able to roam those aisles and just pick up the most obscene, ridiculous movie covers and fantasize about what they would be, and renting that movie, and then it's nothing like what I thought it was going to be, but I would invent this entire movie in my head beforehand. And that just got my imagination going into overdrive as a kid, and just discovering all these movies that had such a huge impact on my life. I mean, that's what my tattoos are. It's, Beetlejuice and Are You Afraid of the Dark and Tales from the Crypt and
Oh, that's cool.
Pete and Pete and Aliens, like all the things that inspired me as a kid. It's like, that was when I discovered all of those things for the first time. And that's such a potent time of your life. It's like, we can sit here and talk about movies, and you can say that you like something or I like something, and then no matter what, there's always politics attached to that. Right. And be it, oh, I know someone that worked on it, or it's not cool to say you like this movie. And even I do it sometimes, and even though I hate myself for it, but like, your opinions can be so swayed by what is popular at the time and what other people think. When you're that young, it's pure. There's no filtering. It's just you're experiencing it all for the first time, and you are truly latching on and exploring the things that you love just because they happen to be there, and there's no pretense to it. And I miss that. I wish that I could just go back in time and be an audience again and just learn about these things and see them for the first time, experience them, and not even knowing how much of an impact these stories and movies were going to have on my life 20, 30 years later. So I wanted to pay homage to like just that time of my life. And like, I truly mourn the death of video stores. Like, the new generations they are so deprived of that experience. And it really was an experience going there with your friends or family and picking a movie. And like, that was you rented one, maybe two movies if you were lucky. And that was your movie for the weekend. It wasn't you watch 10 seconds of 100 different movies on streaming and turn them on. You rented Blood Beach, you're going to fucking watch Blood Beach. For better or worse, you're watching that whole movie. And there's so many things, so many movies that started off like crap and they ended up becoming so much better as they went on, or things that led me to other filmmakers and stuff that I never would have given a shot to if I had access to every movie ever made right in front of me.
One memorable scene or something where the whole movie's stuck with that one scene. Holy crap.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is too, I'm not going to sit here and say that having to travel to a geographic location, and then in the off chance the thing you want was actually there and not rented out, the convenience level of it is absolutely shit. I understand that. I'm not going to say that streaming is not more convenient or better than going to the video store, but I feel like the attitude and the time where those things existed, they'd meant more. It was more of an experience. You had to go out and hunt for something, so it was more rewarding when you found it. and it just, you engaged with media more. It wasn't as disposable, and I think that's the problem. Sound like an old man yelling at kids to get off my lawn. I think that's the problem with
Yeah.
the newer generations, is that media or content is so much more disposable than it used to be, and I think that that's a shame, because you used to have to find this stuff. You used to have to, if you wanted to learn about a movie or the behind the scenes, you had to track down a magazine that had an article or something. And again, I love that I have access to all this stuff all the time now. It's great. It's a great time to be alive, but there is something to be said for having to hunt down your interest and like really absorbing them. And that's how I became this weirdo that I am, where I just was in my own little cocoon where I would just find all this crap and nobody else knew about it. And I would,
Right.
it wasn't even like, oh, I'm so cool because I know about things that people don't know about, which is how I feel like things are now. It was, hey, Rick, come over to my house. I want to show you Dr. Fives Rises Again. It's this 70s British movie with Vincent Price that I showed my entire elementary school class at every birthday party that I had on VHS. What other 80-year-old kid is going to watch Dr. Fives Rises Again? But I just wanted people to experience the things that I experienced and share them, because I thought it was so cool.
Yeah.
And I missed that. And to wrap up this incredibly long-winded answer,
No, it's fine. You're good.
I feel like I'm at a point in my life where this stuff means more to me than it ever had before. And I wanted to express all these things and talk about it, and also talk about nostalgia and the whys of nostalgia, that it's not necessarily like, oh, wow, I remember this thing. It was really cool because I liked it when I was a kid. It's a portal to, this is the point in my life where I first discovered this thing, or I have other memories attached to that. Like, this is the time, this is a movie that my dad took me to go see, or this is the first time I got to go see a movie in a theater by myself. Like, that was a big moment for me. And it's the ancillary stuff. It's the stuff that surrounds those objects. It's the sentimental moments you attach to them. It's not necessarily just the thing itself. It's not, I mean, it can be too, but that's like cheap nostalgia. But there's a deep-rooted nostalgia, which I really feel is just mourning the past. Honestly, I think that's what it really boils down to. And nostalgia can be a terrible trap too. And that's kind of also what the movie's a double-edged sword. You know, you can waste your life living in the past, and sometimes that's not good.
No, not at all. And, it's kind of like, I know we chatted about before, it always comes back, and it's very interesting. So there's an Iron Maiden song that I absolutely love. It's called Wasted Years. And I used to listen to that song very much. It's all about nostalgia. But in a sense, it's also about kind of getting over it a little bit and moving on, so that nostalgia, like you said, doesn't take over, doesn't, cut through the good stuff. And it wasn't until I saw it was an old man. I mean, I say old man, but I'm an old man. He's probably like in the 70s or something like that. He's just some dude playing an acoustic guitar. You should almost send you the link to this thing if you're an Iron Maiden fan. And he's doing a watered down rendition of Wasted Years. And I kid you not, I prefer it over the Iron Maiden. And for the first time, I realized what a friggin' soulful thing this nostalgia song was. And it was all about, and I never even heard the lyrics before I, heard it from this guy. And there was this particular line that really stood out that absolutely captured kind of what you were saying. And it's funny because I actually wrote that down, but I don't know where it is now. But it was something like, here we are, we're always thinking about those golden years, not realizing we're living in, or thinking about those, wasted years, not realizing that we're living in the golden years. So
Absolutely.
It's like, it's always, the new now. But I think it's also important, like with what you're doing, to celebrate that as well, because I think a lot of kids, now we both sound like the old man telling the Rugrats, get off her damn lawn, is they really don't understand. Any kids that were maybe born around, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, they just don't understand, because everything is so accessible that they water down the value and that appreciation that they'll just never know that we got. Like you said, it's like those movie theaters were very much like a portal and a community. You'd go in there and you could talk to the guy at the counter. Hey, I wanted to see this movie. Have you heard about this one? He's like, yeah, hey, you should go check out this one too. Or you might see your neighbors or something. Hey, my son. Or you might see your neighbors in there and say, oh, hey, I didn't know you were here too. And, kind of talk about movies. What are you into? Or
brought people together.
Yeah. Or you see a complete stranger, and next thing you know, you guys are like good friends because he's looking at a movie and you're like, oh, that's a fantastic movie, or no, I don't see that movie. Don't do that, buddy. He's like, don't see that movie. That movie sucked. And and you're like, why did? And yeah, and like it's almost like a brotherhood and a sisterhood over movies.
Absolutely. I remember I saw the Night Flyer for the first time because I went to the video
Oh,
store and the clerk recommended it. He's like, dude, if you like weird, gory stuff, you're gonna love this. And one of my favorite movies now. And movies were a social experience. You talk to people and then you get together and you rent a movie with a bunch of your friends. And people still do that to a degree, but
yeah,
it's much more like, hey, I'm going to bed. Let me just put something on in the background. And you don't really, it's not the same. It used to be a much, like, people, I think, don't realize too, before the advent of video stores, if you watched a movie, you saw it once. It was in the theater, and then it disappeared. Unless it played on TV in a censored version. But even that, like, it's not the same. Like, it's a relatively new thing. I mean, it's 40, 50 years old is not new, I guess, but the 80s were 20 years ago, and I won't listen to anybody say otherwise. But it's such a special thing, and we take it for granted, I feel like. And to your point about the Iron Maiden song, it's definitely something that I've told my nephews before. He's in high school, Mason, and he's talking about, like, he's like, oh, I'm gonna get rid of, I forget what he was collecting. I think it was like Funko Pops or something, which I personally am not a fan of, but he's like, he was a hardcore collector. He's like, I'm gonna get rid of all these. I'm gonna sell them. And I'm like, don't do it. And he's like, why? I'm like, because 20 years from now, you're going to rebuy them on eBay for 15 times the cost, and
right.
you're going to regret it. I said, you don't realize that you are literally living the best time of your life right now. And I hate to quote The Office, but my whole philosophy of this was summed up so beautifully in the one episode. Andy said, I wish there was a time or a way that we could tell that you're in the good old days before they're gone.
Yes.
That just ripped my heart out. I was like, that is exactly what it is. And that's why I'm liking that format. It's a big love letter to all of that / cautionary tale. I don't even know. It's a lot of things, but it is, I feel like it's everything that I want to say as a person and as a filmmaker right now. Like I said, tonally, it's not Mike's Depression, the movie, like White Doomsday was, but it's not like super offensive splatter gore fest comedy like my old stuff. It's that middle ground. I feel like it's a mature, evolved middle ground.
And it's so over the friggin' top too, at least for the story goes. And I know when you're talking about how, yeah, this is going to be a short film, and I get that it's a short story, so why not a short film? That makes sense. Although I think that sometimes some of the best movies are from shorter works, maybe not so much a short story, but certainly more of like a novella length.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, speaking of coming of age stuff, you like Stand By Me, one of the best stories ever.
Yep.
The Mist, fantastic. I guess that's more when you're getting talking about more of the short story stuff. But what differences are there? I mean, without giving away spoilers, but obviously you had to expand on quite a bit. How did you decide on what to expand to make this a short, or to make this a short story, a feature length film, or was it a matter of trying to convey certain aspects of the book was going to be too complicated, and you realized it was going to be a feature length before you realized it was going to be a feature length?
So those are great questions. So part of it, I will say that there was nothing in the story that was so complicated I'm not foolish enough to try to film it, because that absolutely is a thing. And my producers are like, yeah, we're just going to pretend the last 15 pages of the script doesn't exist right now because we don't even want to think about it. The logistics of shooting it. So that'll be a fun problem for later. But I feel like it was a pretty organic process as to what to expand, because it's interesting, because I feel like the screenplay is actually the best version of the story, because when I wrote the short story, I have a tendency to underwrite. Like, I will cut right to the chase on a lot of things. And it's I feel like it's a weakness of mine, because I just don't dwell on stuff as much as I should sometimes. Other times I do, but when I went to write the screenplay, having to tell a story visually versus in prose, because so much of what I write is in the characters' heads. I love digging around in their thoughts and stuff, and internal monologue, because that's how I am as a person. This is a running monologue constantly. And doing it as a film, you have to show it. You can't tell it. So a lot of scenes organically expanded from there. And then because I was able to play with visuals, I was like, oh my God, this would be perfect if, for instance, when he opens the haunted tape, which is not even a spoiler because that's the synopsis of the movie, but it's not a haunted tape. When he opens the haunted tape that he got at the video store, his old membership card falls out of the box, but he had lost that. He hadn't been to that store in 15 years. And it's like, what the hell? It's just a weird moment, but it was so natural. I'm like, yes, absolutely. And I'm like, I wish I could go back and rewrite the story to have all these cool, like little surreal touches and things. But a lot of it was just expanding the dialogue. We brought on Nathan Ludwig as one of my producers. He came in and is helping me fill in some gaps with the screenplay because he is really good at he could write 1,000-page script out of a 10-page idea. Like he endlessly expand on things. So it's really cool because he's coming in and he's like, hey, we need this and this. And he added a new character, added a sister character, and that added a whole new dynamic and changed some stuff. And we're just kind of spitballing things back and forth. And it's funny because I'm so used to writing, directing, producing, doing everything myself. This is the first time where I have like an official, I don't want to say an official team because I've had tons of teams, like tons of people behind me on the other projects, but this is the first time, like right out the gate, I'm actually planning with other people. So it's a really interesting, experience to have a project that I've had marinating in my head for so long, and then to have someone come in and start poking around and playing in my sandbox. And I'd love to say that I'm a really easy collaborator with stuff like that, but I argue about everything. I'm like, no, it has to be this because it's already written. I have it like this, and I have it so clear in my head because I've already built this house. And then to have someone come in and say, yeah, that's great, Mike, but you're missing 2 walls. I'm like, he's right. So it would be a lot easier for me personally if I had you and me come up with an idea for a story right now, and we start pitching back and forth and spitballing. I love doing that. That's so much easier for me because then we can evolve the story together.
Sure.
And that's my comfort zone. But having someone come in and start, like I said, changing stuff I had already had planned for so long is really difficult, but it's also really exciting. And I'm kind of, the joke is every time we have a meeting with the producer, with Sam and Nathan, they pitch ideas and they say this, this, and this. And I'm like, no, here's why you're wrong. And then I go to sleep and I wake up the next morning and I'm like, wait a minute, what if? And I take their idea and then I'm like, yes, actually, you guys were completely right. I'm going to sit there and spot like, that's really cute. We know. So it takes me time awesome. to process and to be more open. It's teaching me to be more open to other people's input, which is like, this movie is so firmly out of my comfort zone right now that I'm in the middle of the fucking ocean right now. Like, it's great.
No, do you think you're able to sit back and laugh about it and say about how great it is being completely out of your ocean? Because, it's almost, what we're looking for. It's almost double-sided, I guess, in a way where, you're calling yourself an independent filmmaker, but making movies is the furthest thing from being independent. You've got to have a good team, where it's not going to get done well, if at all. But do you think you can sit back and kind of laugh about letting other people, stick their toes and play with your sand and mess around with your ideas and tell you that you're wrong, they're right, and laugh about it because they're good friends of yours that you've known for a long time? Like, do you think if you had a team of sort of high, for hire people or whatnot, or that were just recommended to you, and if they gave you the same response, do you think that you would be able to still be as creatively fluent, if you will, working with them?
That's a good question. I feel like the team that I have on this movie with Sam and Nathan and Brian, I wanted to work with them because I have a mutual respect of their work, and I'm a fan and they're friends of mine. So it makes it a lot easier because I already do respect what they do and I know that their ideas are good. So that definitely does help. Working with friends can sometimes be harder because if you need to like discipline someone or be disciplined, right, it's harder to take from someone that you already know. And I've been a manager in my regular life for many, many years. So I know how difficult it can be to kind of, have to chastise a friend, but it's necessary. And I think we all have such a mutual respect for each other that it hasn't been a problem. If it were just completely random people, I think on the one hand, it would be easier to accept feedback because they're a complete outsider and they have no reason to spare my feelings. They're not gonna sugarcoat anything, which is nice because it's also hard to get and give feedback to people that you're friends with. If it's not good, if it's not, praise, it's difficult. But you have to have a thick skin to do any of this kind of stuff anyway. So you gotta learn how to deal with it. But it's hard because I'm used to being completely in charge of all of my productions. Like I'm usually the, judge, jury, executioner. Yeah. And to a degree, I still am. Like I still have final say on this. I'm still one of the big producers, one of the producers on the project. But having them alongside me has been so incredibly beneficial, and it's for the first time I'm seeing what it's like to have like a full professional crew behind me, because so much of the stress is taken off my shoulders, because there's so many, like in an independent film, everyone wants to do everything, right? So it's like, oh, I'll write, direct, produce, do special effects, film it, edit it, everything. But you can be a jack of all trades, but then the other part of that is master of none. So a director should really just be focusing on the vision of the film, and that's it. Not, oh my God, how are we going to pay for catering? And having Sam and Nathan and Brian on board, they've taken a lot of that stuff off my plate so I can focus on the things that I need to focus on. And the aspects that they're tackling for me, the business end of it, the behind the scenes stuff, is so nice because they're better at it than I am. And I can admit that fully. I'm not a master of film. Like I was a one-man show for years out of necessity. And it wasn't that other people weren't helping me. It's just I was the one who was doing the research to try to figure out how can we do X, Y, and Z. And they were just people that were awesome enough to come on board and be like, yeah, whatever you want, Mike. Like, point me in a direction, I'll do it. But I was still the captain of the ship, and I only have one eye, So it's nice to have people that have experience in different areas that I don't, and that I'm learning from them, and I hope that they're learning from me. I think the biggest thing that they're learning is never fucking work with me, because I'm impossible to deal with, and I get so incredibly amped up and involved in everything. Like I'm so fixated on all this stuff that they're just like, dude, you need to take a break. And I'm like, what's that? I'll sleep when the movie's done, and not even that. But they constantly yell at me. They're like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I have one mode, and that is just full bore.
Just
every
go.
night. All I will do, I will not stop until I'm just like a bleeding husk, and I will collapse from exhaustion before I give up intentionally. And not the best thing to do at 37, I'm learning, but no. It was a lot easier.
But it's a great plot, though, for that movie about killing yourself while making a movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Masterwork is so raw that I can't even sit down and write it, because it's too much a lot of the time. I pitched it to people, and I pitched the ending of it, and they just stare at me. They're like, do you need a hug? And I was like, oh, fine.
That's correct. Well, and the nice thing, too, but I know certainly with Brian Keane as well, is that he's been through this movie stuff before. He's been through so many trials and tribulations and muck, and having other people screw up his stuff. And, he's certainly worked in other people's sandboxes before. I mean, he's doing it all the time as well. So I would think that having, a producer like that in your back pocket as well to work with while going through all this, that's got to be such a lifeline for you to grab onto, I would think, too, while making this.
Well, yeah, and like I said, it's really important that, working with people that you have a respect for and you're a fan of. And then there's Brian. But, his...
Look for a second.
No, I was a huge fan of Brian. He's been a mentor to me since I was 17 years old, which I will never stop. Every time he asks me to do something, I'm like, why are you even asking? I'm like, I will never say no to you. Like, I owe you such an incredible amount for everything that he's done for me. And he's like me. He hates asking for help, and he doesn't accept praise.
Yeah, that's true.
You have no idea, what Brian has done for me. The biggest thing is he's never been like, here's a bunch of money, or here, I'm going to set you up with this person, or whatever. He believed in me. When I was just a weird 17-year-old kid, I met him and JF Gonzalez, and I was at a book signing. I'm rambling about all these stories. I pitched Masterwork to them when I was 19.
Oh, wow.
And they both just went silent. And I was like, oh, boy, I did that thing again where I don't shut up, and I'm just rambling. And they're looking at me like I'm a jackass. And they both just looked at each other. And JF Gonzalez, I'll never forget this, he said, I didn't learn this stuff until I was in my 40s because I told him, I said the ultimate end moral of masterwork that this character learns is that the only true muse is pain.
Hmm.
And they both looked at me, and Brian is like, I don't even know what to say to you. Like, this is, you are so, I don't want to say wise beyond your years, because I'm certainly not wise, but he's like, you have an understanding and a soulfulness about you that does not match the age that you are. But his
Yeah, that's
encouragement
profound.
and having somebody that I respected so much who was in the business saying, you are valid, you have good ideas, like this is great stuff, you should continue this. Growing up, I had so little of that. I was a black sheep in my family. None of my friends were really into the shit that I was. I was I was Evil Dead kid in high school. Not that I didn't have friends, but I was in my own world. And to meet people that are also in that world that were older than me, that were actually doing it, and to have them say, "You're on the right path, kid. Like, keep it up," was just life changing for me. I say it all the time to Brian. I said I was the best man at his wedding, and I said, I gave this big speech, and I was like, dude, there are so few people that can say that they know the exact moment their life changed. And for me, it was in a Walden Books in Park City Mall, picking up a copy of Rue Morgan. I saw a review for a book called The Rising, and I said, a zombie book? What is that? I didn't know they broke books about zombies. And I
Oh.
and that exact moment put me on a trajectory that completely changed. I would not be speaking to you right now if I wouldn't have arbitrarily picked up that magazine. And it's just been great to have Brian on the project again
That's
because of that.
something
Like, I
else.
have such a deep respect for him. And he was a producer on, I'm Dreaming of a White Doomsday.
Yeah.
And having him on board has certainly opened a lot of doors. And I appreciate that so much. And Sam and Nathan, they come from the indie film world. They've both been film festival runners. They're filmmakers. They're writers. The same with me. So
Yeah.
when we get together, the joke is that there's no bullshit in our meetings. It's not like these pie in the sky dreams like, man, and then when we get our theatrical release for the movie, it's going to blow up and we're going to be the #1 movie and blah, all this stuff. When you start a project, everyone has these big pie in the sky dreams. And then, grizzled, indie film veterans come in and piss all over your parade. But for us, we just cut right through the bullshit and we're like, okay, here's what's realistic. This is what we can do. This is the amount of money we can raise, and here's the type of movie we can make. Here's where realistically we'll play. Not to say that we don't have big aspirations and big dreams. We do.
Of course.
We've all been through it enough. We know, okay, here's how it's going to play out. And it feels like putting on armor beforehand. It's like, okay, we know what we're getting into. We're staring the gun we're staring down the barrel. We don't have a blindfold on and the firing squad. We know what we're getting into.
Yeah.
And that's so important for a project as big and complicated as this, because if I would go into it as a naive, starry-eyed kid, I'd want to kill myself because that's what Doomsday was. Like it was so arduous and horrible. And I mean, I loved every second of it, but I know what I'm looking at now, and it's great. It's like, I know it's a giant mountain, but also with that experience and that knowledge and the support system I have, we're not scaling Mount Everest. We're climbing a series of small hills. And then eventually we're going to look back and realize that we're at the top of a fucking mountain. So it's just piece by piece, bit by bit. And we're all just we're all each other's lifeline. And it's been wonderful. I love collaborating with everybody. It's been so great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, the little bit that I know from Brian as well is I have no doubt at all that he's probably looking at how far you've come, the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that you're doing right now, and the stuff that you're no doubt going to continue to do as probably his validation. Well, I don't know if validation, but no doubt he's very proud and he's able to look at all this stuff and think, I know that's meaningful for him, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
No, absolutely.
No doubt about that.
He always says that is his third son.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is he was such a father figure to me. And he's responsible for the person I am today, for better or worse. I always joke. One of the big things I actually said it in my speech, because it was getting too emotional and nice. I said, Ryan, I just want you to know that this is the most fulfilling relationship with an older man that I've ever had.
That's great. That's great, man. And I kind of get the impression too, Mike, that if you hadn't gone through hell with Dreaming of a White Doomsday, I kind of get the impression that without that experience, you wouldn't have been able to move forward with this experience that you're starting to embark on with Dead Format. Is that accurate or?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a dream of mine since I was a kid to make my own. I wanted to be a horror movie maker since I was a kid, was what I used to say in all my old school reports. And making a feature, making White Doomsday was an absolute dream for me. And the people that I had on board, my crew on that, were incredible human beings that put up with so much more hell than any sane person reasonably would have. But if we didn't go through that, again, I wouldn't have the experience and the perspective to jump into this again. And now, granted, it's been 7 years since I made White Doomsday because it thoroughly wrecked me. And I was so between that and the festival circuit. And I mean, it was 4 years of filming and then 2 years of festival screenings in distro. And then I ran some film festivals in between, and all this, the people that I met and networked with because of White Doomsday led to other things. And I burnt myself out so horribly and then became a corporate shill and became in retail management and just completely sucked my soul out and didn't want to do anything creative for years until the book came out. So this is me coming back to life. Like, I feel like my old self again. And I don't think
It's so good to hear.
It's the ebb and flow, without the peaks and the valleys, there wouldn't be the peaks. And I just feel like this is the time of my life where I'm ready to get back into it,
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And congratulations, by the way, too. I suppose that, as we're talking about the film, I kind of alluded to at the very, I mentioned the very beginning of our conversation about, that you were doing preliminary stuff to get ready for the crowdfunding. You guys are I want to say 80% funded on that now?
50, just on the brink of 53% funded.
Oh, 53. Why did I say 80%?
I love that. I wish I could blink and blink.
I'm seeing the crystal ball here. I've looked into my coffee mug and I see 80%. Just don't ask me when. It's I like my coffee dark, so it's a little bit obscured.
But yeah, we are trying to raise $60,000, which is an irresponsibly large amount of money to try to raise in a crowdfunder. But we are $32,000 in, something like that. It's only been about 2.5 weeks. So our first day, we raised over $10,000, which is incredible. I was terrified. My imposter syndrome was on full blast this entire time, where I was telling everybody that I haven't made a movie in 7 years. Nobody gives a shit anymore. Like, why would they care? Nobody cares about White Doomsday or the book. Like, it's stupid. Nobody cares. And then we raised, I think it was like just under $12,000 in 24 hours. And everyone is messaging me and texting me like, oh my God, you're back. We're so excited. And I mean, I actually recorded a video at the end of day one, just as a little update. And I'm just like, the entire time, like, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry in this video.
I saw that. Yeah.
I didn't even know what to say. I was so floored that so many people cared. And like, I don't know how else to say it that way. It sounds so stupid, but like, when you're in this shit, like, you don't think that anyone's paying attention. You don't think they care. It doesn't matter. You can tell me that I made the greatest movie of all time, and I'm like, yeah, that's really nice. Why are you lying to me? And it's so stupid and self-defeating, but you think that way. And, you can get 100 great reviews in a row, and you get that one bad review, and that's the one that's true. That's the one, because everybody else is only saying good things because they like you, and that's what you think.
Right.
It's stupid, because it's like at all these festival screenings, they're just complete fucking strangers that are coming up to me sobbing and crying and talking about how beautiful they thought that White Doomsday was, and I'm like,
wow,
no, you're lying. Like, that's like, there's no reason for them to bullshit me.
Yeah.
So to have the response that we did to the crowdfunder was just so. It's just it was awe-inspiring. It was incredible, and it's continued to grow, and people are coming out of the woodwork, which is awesome. And I mean, it's slowed down currently. I mean, there's always they say that after like the first 3 days, it's going to slow down to nothing. It took us about 2 weeks at that point, which is good, because we are currently sitting at, like I said, $32,000 is more money than most people raise in their entire campaign for an indie film. But Dead Format is such a big project, and $60,000 isn't even enough money to make the damn thing. Like, I've already invested several $1,000s of my own money. All the money I made from White Doomsday, I've been hoarding for years because I knew I was going to make another project. So I've dumped money like that into it. I will continue to dump my own money into it because I have self-financed every other project I've ever made. White Doomsday was 90% funded by me, and then a couple people came in because they're angels when I ran out of money and finished paying for the movie for me, which is lovely. I'll never stop thanking Jay Sorensen and Brian for coming in and helping. And actually, Jay is one of our executive producers through the crowdfunder on this one as well. So thank you, Jay. But I'm putting my own money into this, and I've been collecting props, and people are donating objects and props and things as well. And
That's cool.
It's just incredible because, like, to make this movie, the scale of this movie is so huge that we're insane for trying to make it for $60,000. Because what people don't realize too is that when we hit our goal, they're like, "What would you do if you overfund?" And such a thing doesn't exist, because I have to pay for all of the perks to make the VHS copies that we just announced today, to do the Blu-rays, the video store cards, the T-shirts. That all costs money out of that $60,000, and then shipping comes out of that $60,000, and then the fees from Indiegogo. So we're basically kissing $10,000-$11,000 goodbye right off the bat. So
that hurts.
It does, but we're planning. We're able to scale the movie to whatever our budget range is, and if we don't make enough in the Kickstarter or the crowdfunder, we will pursue private fundraising options. We've got some ideas for some events we can run and get private donations and things like that. So the movie is going to be made regardless. Like, I don't want anyone to think that they're throwing their money in the trash. It will be done. White Doomsday, against all sane odds, was completed, played all over the world, and won a bunch of awards and was distributed. And that was infinitely more slapdash than this. So, 1,000% confident this will get done. If we overfund, air quotes, that money will just go into getting more props, the biggest thing is time. On an indie film, having time is the most important thing.
Right.
Because
and especially new
special effects and all that stuff. We broke it down. $60,000 will give us enough to film for 14 days or some about that, which is nothing. If we have another $10,000, we can add another 5 days to that, which means we can take our time and make sure we get it right and do exactly what we want there to be on the screen. So that money it's not going to line my pocket. I'll tell you that. I'm not making a dime off of this. Nobody is. Nobody's getting paid to produce this film. Every dime that we raise is going on the screen. And I hope that people understand that, because, like, we're not taking a salary. Like, this is I work a day job to survive. This is my other life is just because I love it. It's passion.
Yeah, and that's clear to tell. I mean, that's the only way to do this stuff is just pure passion, because it's the only way to combat sanity or insanity, I suppose, is the passion.
I tell people that creativity is a compulsion. It's not a choice. I have to do this. I can't. I tried being a normal person for 7 years. Did not work. Like, I was jonesing.
Overrated.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't work. I can't not make stuff. I can't not come up with ideas and do all this crazy nonsense. But that's just me. I'm terminal. I can't not do it.
Well, thank goodness for all the fans that are waiting for more of your stuff. So thank you for being terminal. And speaking of the overfunding too, I was thinking about that. If you were to overfund, like, would that give you the option of being able to rent out like to actually be on a set and in a studio where you could then apply for some sort of a grant funding, or how does? I'm not sure.
So there are grants for indie films, but there's very few for horror films, because horror is a ghetto genre, despite the fact that it's the best-selling and most consistently profitable and celebrated genre in history. But it's trash. Oh, you're one of those kind of filmmakers. Oh,
yeah, okay. To Universal, that they're just pumping like crazy.
Exactly. But if we got more money, we're going to be building sets and doing stuff. Being able to shoot on a soundstage would be an absolute dream, because as opposed to filming in a real living room, for instance, we don't have to worry about people mowing their grass or airplanes or no air conditioning and 1,000-degree lights because the AC is too loud to be on while the movie's being shot. shooting in a soundstage is a controlled environment. We're gonna have to build sets. The living room that takes a lot of the movie takes place in, we will have to do a set, at least a version of that for the finale of the movie, because let's just say that there may or may not be chainsaws involved. So we cannot do that in someone's actual house. So we're gonna have to at least duplicate portions of the living room in a set. So that will be a thing. Whether we can afford it, I don't know. That's up to you guys if you want to contribute to the project and help us do that. But all I can say is every dollar that we raise that's over that $60,000 will just make the movie better.
Excellent. And I'll put a link down below too, so anybody that wants to chip in a couple of bucks, check out all the awesome perks that you guys have available as well. They'll be able to do all that, because from what I understand, not just pure fans of yours, but fans that have also been sort of mentors of yours for a long time, I believe, came out. I don't want to say came out of the woodwork, because I'm sure they've always been there for you, but they've also contributed too. I'm thinking Ed Lee, and there's several other people I know that you kind of did a whole "I'm not worthy" sort of thing on them.
Yeah, having Edward Lee jump on is huge to me. He was a big supporter of White Doomsday, and Edward Lee is my all-time favorite author of all time. I own almost every book the man's ever written, which is a significant amount of books.
It's a good library.
Over 50 books, I believe, at last count. That was huge to me. He actually wrote the introduction for Please Don't Tap on the Glass. We did a limited edition hardback through Thunderstorm, and he was kind enough to write an introduction for it, which actually did make me weep in the parking lot of Target when I was getting off work that day.
So you did
so having him jump on is huge. And again, it's just like with Brian, it's just that validation is so wonderful, and just someone whose work I admire so much. And a lot of my indie filmmaking peers have come out. Chris LaMartina just became an executive producer. The guy who made WNUF Halloween special, and What Happens Next Will Scare You. I've worked with Chris plenty of times doing special effects and stuff. I love working with him. Him and his producing partner, Jimmy George, and his wife, Melissa. Fucking amazing people, amazing filmmakers. Having them jump on board it just means so much. It's like, wow, because it's so easy to say, oh yeah, you're great. I love your stuff. Well, and then, talk is cheap, but he made this really beautiful post and he said, I'm putting my money where my fucking mouth is. And, he donated $1,000. Like, that's huge.
That's enormous.
And he's like, I want you to be able to make this movie because I believe in you. And like, that's huge. Like, people have been so unbelievably generous, and I'm not a good enough writer to formulate the words to express how much it means to me that everyone has been helping out this project so much. It is just truly, truly remarkable to me.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I'm so glad this stuff is coming together for you, because that was the number one thing that I came away with as an impression of you when I met you last year at the AuthorCon, was not just that you have great tastes in T-shirts, and that you reel people in with your reciprocating love for T-shirts as well, but also just your pure passion like that. They really are infectious, and I'm glad that there's only a 50% chance of controlling that that spread, because you got to spread that stuff around. It's great. And speaking of your writing too, and I know you mentioned that you did a novelization for a special limited for Thunderstorms. Do you think at the end of all this, could you see yourself doing a novelization of Dead Format?
It's interesting. I thought about that. I'm like, what if I were to rewrite the short story to match the movie? Because I thought about that with White Doomsday too. I don't know if that's too meta, like too much of a snake eating its own tail to readapt the adaptation. But I had a running joke when we made White Doomsday. I said, since I wrote the original short story too, can I send myself death threats for all the stuff that I changed for the movie? Like, how does that work? But I don't know. I do have another writing project that I am was doing before I got derailed into making another movie, and that's like it's going to be at the time it was, I don't know what it's going to be now, but it was going to be 3 short stories, like long short stories, called Side Pieces, and it was originally going to be just like 3 extreme horror stories, because I never really like let myself go like full bore with that, and then that turned into somehow super personal, sad, depressing stuff mixed with extreme horror. I wrote a story called Carnival Night that I was told was What's Eating Gilbert Grape if it was directed by Alexandre Aja, who was the director of the Hills Have Eyes remake. I actually heard that from a couple people, which I think is the greatest compliment I've ever received. Actually, my producer Nathan, at the time when he first pre-read the story, he said he was in an Arby's eating and he threw up in his mouth. And then at the end, he was crying. And he's like, "What the hell did you do to me?" So
You have to know it.
that couple stories. There's another story called The Whiskey Shits, which is definitely much more comedic, but still pretty depressing. And that was about the period of my life where I was working at Target instead of making projects and stuff. And then I have another story that I need to write. So I wrote 2 of the 3 and then got derailed with this. So, at the rate that I write, maybe 20 years from now, I'll have another book out. But I want to do that. And then, maybe people have been pushing me to write masterwork as a novelette or a novella and then adapt that into a screenplay because I have hundreds of pages of notes for this thing and I just can't seem to sit down and write it. I don't think I'm ready to write it just yet because it's pretty much ripping open Brian told me once that you bleed on the page and masterwork is me hitting an artery. Like it's everything in my life just laid bare on there. So I mean, if I was to write it as a novella, I think that I would be able to get a lot more of it out of my head. And because when I write something long form like that, it's so much easier than writing a script because you can really dig into the things you want to dig into. Whereas with a screenplay, you have to tell it visually. So, I mean, I think it might actually be a really valuable exercise to novelize one of these screenplays instead of and do it the reverse to how I normally do it. So who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But maybe.
You're called I tapped on the glass and this is what happened.
Yeah.
I looked into the void and the void looked back.
I'd tap that glass. That's what I call it.
I tapped that. There you go. You can just call it that. I tapped that. I'm gonna get banned here on YouTube. So speaking of things to considering that you absolutely write and you create from the heart and you drive home some really personal pieces of you into your stories, such as, Please Don't Tap on the Glass, as Dead Format, as Masterclass. When you put these things on the page and, in a couple of cases and about to be another case where you put it on the screen as well, do you find does that have a cathartic quality to you, or is it really just beating the living shit out of a muse just so the pain becomes numb and you're like, all right, I beat that thing to death, now let's move on to the next pain? Or is it kind of a healing process for you? How does...
I think it's practically a little bit of both. It does actually, I hate saying that it feels like an exorcism, that seems so pretentious, but it is. Because I think when I'm writing, for instance, the stuff in Weekend at Escobar's, which is one of the stories in Please Don't Tap on the Glass, there's a whole subplot about the main character accidentally crippling his younger brother with a baseball bat when they were kids. And that, I was not planning on writing about that stuff. When I wrote that story, there was no part of my mind that said, hey, Mike, why don't you write a story about how you got your head caved in with a baseball bat when you were 6 and dressed like a pirate when your brother was playing home run derby and that you almost died and then didn't come to terms with the fact that you almost died for 20 years. And then I'm just writing and all of these repressed memories of that just started flooding into the story. And I don't know where it came from, but when I'm writing, I think it's the only time I'm really truly honest with myself, which again sounds very pretentious, but you get into a groove and you just start writing and stuff just starts flowing. And then, you look back on it and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize I was writing about this. Like when I wrote White Doomsday, I was writing about my mom being in the hospital, and I was writing about watching someone you care about fading away and being helpless to stop it. That's what I wanted to write about. When I wrote that story and I look back at it, I'm like, oh my God, I wrote a story about growing up in this environment where my dad was in a coma. My mom was taking care of all of us and shielding us from reality. Like all these things that I didn't even realize. I thought I was writing about one traumatic event. And I was actually dealing with all of this pent up stuff that I didn't even realize was swimming around in my subconscious, which is what I I talked about the introduction to Please Don't Tap on the Glass, is that I feel like my head is an aquarium sometimes. It's filled with stuff, and you tap on it long enough, you don't know what you're going to stir up. And that was what that book was. It's just me just focusing in, like, all right, let's just do it. Let's just confront this shit. And it's scary and it's sad and it's difficult, but it feels so good. And then the biggest thing is if you can turn a traumatic event or a horrible thing that happened in your life and make something out of it, it feels like it's productive. Then it's productive pain. Like when Doomsday screened at festivals, people would come up to me afterwards and they would hug me, complete strangers, sobbing, and they're like, I lost my son, or my husband, or whatever, and they would talk about their experiences with grief and losing people, and it struck a chord with them. And I think that good writing gives a voice to the voiceless. There's so many times where I'm reading something and it's like a little turn of phrase will just freeze me in my tracks, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, this right here. And it's like, thank you to whoever wrote this for giving this to me and vocalizing this thing, this abstract concept I could not articulate myself, and I can do that for people sometimes, and that's such a great feeling too.
That's the best.
Yeah. It is, and it's reading is the closest thing you'll ever have to being able to climb inside somebody else's brain and see the world through their eyes. And as a creator, I can portray something that people can see, and hopefully their worldview is not like mine, but it's an incredible way to relate to people, and I think that that's really important. So, as painful as it is to rip yourself open sometimes, because doing this stuff, it feels like, I always say, it's like walking up on stage and tearing open your own chest and letting the world just stare at your guts. It's like this exhibitionist masochism. And that's what it is. It's so weird. And like the cover of our first DVD, Suburban Holocaust, is literally our character, Dr. Chud, with the gas mask ripping his stomach open and film is coming out of him. That's what it's like. It's like, this is all the shit in you, and it's just waiting to spill out and for the world to see. And most people don't do that. They don't want people to stare, like to be judged by strangers. But as writers and filmmakers and artists, we thrive on it. For some weird reason, it's so strange that we suffer in public. It's just strange. I have such a weird relationship with my own creative drive sometimes that I don't even know what else to say about it. But I don't even know what the question was.
I don't remember either. But I think I like where it took us here. We'll have to I'll remember it in the replay, I'm sure. So yeah, no, that's great. It's funny. It's almost like we become our own. To steal, I guess, a title from Clive Barker. Our own. Hills in the city, where it's like we just, along the way, we just pick up all this pain, all this trauma, and all these horrible things, and eventually it kind of rolls through somebody else's town, and then they become a part of it, and it becomes a part of them, and it's, it all kind of is one big conglomerate community of horrible things that we all feel better because we're kind of in it together.
Absolutely. I love that story, by the way. It's one of my favorite Clive Barker stories. Such a great story. Actually, his introduction to the Books of Blood omnibus they did, it was volumes 1 through 3, I think. I read it in high school. He said that a short story collection is a graveyard of your past selves. And I fucking loved that so much. He said, I can pinpoint exactly where I was in my life when I wrote every single one of these stories. And that's what it feels like. I never forgot that. That's exactly what it's like to look back on your work. You're like, oh my God, I know exactly. Like, you may not understand it in the moment why you're writing this random idea for this thing. You have like, why am I writing about this Colombian drug cartel deal going wrong? What's up with this Weekend at Bernie's parody? Why did it get so dark? And then 5 years later, you look back and it's like, oh my God, I was facing down my own mortality, like for the first real time in my life. And it's like, wow, okay. I didn't realize that's what I was doing there. But with a little bit of distance, you look back and it's like, man, this was heavy shit.
It is a run that I'm grateful for on your behalf, that was the personal aspect of the Weekend at Escobar's, not that crazy, killer sex dungeon.
I mean, I didn't get to the other half of the inspiration for that story.
Please go on. This is why I shouldn't talk so much.
Well, that story started like all the other ones, where it was originally supposed to be a funny. I have obsession with Weekend at Bernie's. So like, wouldn't it be hilarious if there was, if they Weekend at Bernie's a corpse across the border that was filled with drugs and money? Wouldn't that be funny? It was actually going to be a zombie story originally, and the drugs that they smuggle break open, the condom breaks inside of him, and he turns into a zombie, and then he's going off and infecting people everywhere, and then the drug cartel is trying to find the zombie because they don't want to shoot him because he's filled with their drugs. It's all the money. And then somehow that turned into a story about snuff and like prostitution and just awful. And I'm writing it and I'm like laughing, and then it just gets darker and darker and darker. And I'm like, wow, what the fuck is wrong with me?
That was a dark story. That was fantastic.
That might be one of the most overtly, like, the ending of that story is probably one of the darkest things I've ever written. And because it wasn't, not personally dark, just in general, it's tonally, like, it is so pitch black that people read it. They're just like, dude, I didn't even know what to say to you after I read that. It was like, oh, well,
Yeah, like the guy doesn't exactly become an anti-hero. He just, it's great. It's great. Speaking of, I guess, like crazy characters and all that kind of stuff. Now, have you allowed yourself at this stage in development and the crowdfunding for Dead Format, have you allowed yourself to consider where all of your filming locations are going to be, who you might like to cast as the film? I know obviously it's like, do we hire, the guy a few doors down, or do you go for like a B-list actor or somebody? Obviously funding does make a difference on that, but have you considered that?
Yes, we're trying to wait until we raise all the money to see what we're working with before we start casting and doing that stuff. There are locations secured. Brian's store, Vortex Books and Comics in Columbia, PA, will be transformed into Video Castle. That's the fake video store.
Okay, that's cool.
For the movie, so that is already secured. I have some actors in mind. There's just there's the dream list, and then there's the, where we're going to go with that. But there's some people that I'd like to work with again. We don't have anything set in stone yet, but we're going to probably focus on casting after the crowdfunder, if only just because then I'll have a large portion of my mental facilities back that I'm not focusing on promoting the Kickstarter or the Indiegogo, the crowdfunder every day. But I mean, honestly, like dream, I would love to have Clint Howard in this movie as the video store clerk. I will speak that into the universe again. I wanted to hire him for the short film version years ago, and I don't know how much it would cost. I don't know if it's feasible, if he'd even want to do it, but I absolutely adore that man, and he is such a perfect representation of that era of film that I am talking about with this movie.
Yeah.
Like that 80s, early 90s direct-to-video stuff, like that was Clint Howard's realm, and every time I see him pop up in a movie, it makes the movie infinitely better. And I just think he's such a great actor, and I accidentally wrote the video store clerk with the speech cadence of him. So now I kind of have to do it. So, and that's actually, if we could raise extra money, honestly, that would be my wish list item, is to try to get Clint Howard in this movie for all 13 lines that he would have. But, I would just absolutely adore having the opportunity to work with him. He's my all-time favorite actor, and I think that would just be great. So hopefully we'll see. But
now, do you have a relationship with him at all, or do you have a starting point for how to conduct?
I drove out to a convention once solely to meet him. I was running the Scream Team releasing table as well, selling movies, my distribution label that Doomsday is on.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was trying to work up the nerve to go talk to him and then pitch the idea to him. And when I finally worked up the courage to go over there, he had left because it was a slow day. It was a Friday, and he left early to go out to dinner with some people. And I was only able to be there that Friday. I had to drive back to work by the morning, so I missed my chance, which might have been a blessing in disguise, because now we're doing the feature. So now, there's actually a much better chance that I would be able to feasibly hire him instead of just being like, oh, can you be in my movie? So I don't know. We'll see. But I do not have a relationship. I know people that have connections to him, which is great. So we'll see. I'll at least be able to pitch it, I believe. I don't know where we'll go from there, but if I get the opportunity, I will be able to pitch it, I feel like.
Very cool. Well, all the best of luck for that.
Thank you.
So what stage are you at now then? So you're obviously just doing the funding. You're trying to, I would assume get all you're still collecting props. I even saw a picture earlier with the Castle Video neon sign. That
Yes.
looked fabulous.
Yes, that was cool. My buddy Julius Brunk designed that for us. He did all the video store stuff for us too, the membership cards and all that. Been working with him for years. So we're collecting props. That's what I do. Like, I marinate in stuff. Like, I collect props. I make things. I've been making a lot of shit. We have to make hundreds of fake video boxes and stuff. So I've been doing that. And like, I immerse myself in those types of projects in the art direction, and that inspires the script. So I still am going over the script and working on that because we want to add some more stuff and change some things. So all of that is happening simultaneously with the crowdfunder, but we are firmly in pre-production. I mean, we've already come up with logistics. I have to do breakdowns for all of the effects work because I'm going to be doing the special effects for the movie as well. And I will say that it is a lot messier than the short story. Like, the short story is graphic. This is much, much, much more graphic. There is a lot of gore in this movie, which I'm very excited about, because White Doomsday was not bloodless, but it was a different kind of violence, and there wasn't... There was a little bit of gore. There's little splashes here and there, but this is like full-blown 80s horror movie gore in some scenes, which I'm very, very excited about. So
yeah, I can't wait for that, especially with there's a one scene that involves your neighbor that I thought was just batshit insane. And I understand the neighbor is a real neighbor. I think you still beside him now. He's still your same neighbor.
There's two neighbors that it's based off of. In the short story, his name is Scott Rizzo. My neighbor growing up was named Joe Rizzo. He was obsessed with his lawn. And I actually saw him weeping in his yard at 2 a.m. because there was a drought and there was dead spots in his grass. He was actually crying over his lawn, which is insane to me, but he was a loon. Nice guy, but he was crazy. And
he's about his grass.
My current neighbor is just insane and obsessed with his graphs, and we do not get along, let's say. So it was a composite of the two of them together. And if you thought that the short story was ugly with him, just wait till you see the movie.
That's awesome. Are you not a friend of the grass, Mike?
No, I wish I could pave my entire fucking lawn. I hate mowing. I hate landscape. I hate it all. I don't go in the grass. I don't care about the grass. I don't want it. I just want parking. That's what I'd love, is just to live in a concrete world.
So that's kind of funny, actually, because I'm just imagining, because I know I love the smell of freshly cut grass. I'll walk down the street and I'll smell it. And to me, it smells like summer, like, freedom. We can get outside. We can wear whatever we want to. That's as long as it's socially acceptable and that. But I can picture you going, down the street, freshly cut grass, and thinking, yes, I smell the tears of 1,000 dead blades of grass. Not you sons of bitches.
That's something along those lines, yes. Also, I'd like to say, if you like mowing grass, by all means, I'll give you my address after the show. You can come and do mine. I don't want to deprive you of that delightful scent of freshly mown grass.
That is awesome. Well, being from Canada, I am, of course, a friendly folk, but I'm only going to ask for airfare and maybe some pizza when I get there.
Hey, that's fine. If I don't have to mow, it's worth it to me.
Man, you really hate that grass.
I really do.
Perfect. I'll bring some bleach or some gasoline in a match with me too. I'll just do it once for you. It'll be done.
That's the problem, yeah.
Awesome. So I guess to kind of speaking of flying and stuff, to land the plane, as they say. God, I hate that expression, but I guess it's I just used it. Regarding your film here, then, so what is the most important thing that fans of yours, people that might be watching this first time, saying, who the heck is Mike Lombardo? This movie sounds awesome, but why should I watch it? Why should I cough up a few bucks to help this movie get made? Stage is yours. What do you say to all those poor unknowing people that are kind of on the fence about this? What do you say to them?
Pressure. That's a great question. Oh, if you like video stores, if you like 90s nostalgia, if you like personal stuff. If you like horror cinema that has heart, that has some substance to it, I think this is a movie that you probably will enjoy. I will say that this movie is my life. This is everything that I care about. It's what I live. I live for independent film, and the only way we can make it is with your help. And every time you get out of the theater and you're like, damn, I'm so tired of seeing another Marvel movie, or this movie sucks, it's so generic, I'm tired of Blumhouse movies. This is how you can get something maybe not better, but different. Just remember that everything that you see when you walk outside of your house, every sign, every book, every TV commercial, everything is art. Someone made that. And we take it for granted how we are surrounded with people's creativity. And I think it's really important to support that creativity, not even just mine. You know, I would love it if you would go to the Indiegogo and give me lots of money to make this movie, and please do. That would be amazing. But remember that there is also a ton of other people making movies and crowdfunding. Like, don't think that this is a plea from just me. Support film, support books, support artists. You know, even if you don't have money, share the campaign, talk about the movies that you like. You know, go on Facebook and message a director or a writer that you like something from them and tell them. You'd be amazed at how much hearing that from a stranger can impact the day of someone who made something. You know, people are spending years of their lives making these things, and we're working in a vacuum, and we're convinced that we're shit and our product is shit. But hearing it from a complete stranger is a wonderful thing, and you'll know that that could be the day that they're about to throw in the towel. I mean, I disappeared for 7 fucking years, and people would send me random messages like, I loved your Christmas movie. I watch it every year. And like that absolutely warmed my heart. And it's the accumulation of people supporting and doing that is what made me come out of my hermit hole and want to do this again. So it's never a waste of time to talk about the things that you like. It's very trendy to talk about the stuff that you hate, to make fun of movies and shit. And yeah, that's fine. It's fun. But talk about the shit that you like. It doesn't matter if it's brand new or if it's old, whatever. Just talk about it. We need people to discuss the art that they like and the things that they want to see more of. And a great way to do that is financially. You can support Indiegogo, you can support Kickstarters, you can send money, you can buy physical media, you know, watch things on Tubi, because the ad revenue, like every dime matters. Everything, all of it matters. Every little drop and ounce of support makes a difference, even though you might think it's invisible or, oh, they probably get hundreds of fan letters a day and they don't give a shit what I say. You might not be right in that. I guarantee they will absolutely care what you say. And I'm not wording this very well, but this movie is everything to me. I am so excited to be back and to do this. And I see that you guys out there do give a shit. You do care and you are supporting me. And I am eternally grateful for that. And I hope that you continue to do so. And to anyone out there who has never seen or read anything of mine, I invite you to do so. And I hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that you will consider going to the Indiegogo, and even $5 makes a difference. You know, it beats the algorithm. It helps get the project out there. And, you know, if 100 people throw $5 our way, that's $500. That could be the difference between being able to chainsaw someone's intestines out or not. So, you know, to put it very bluntly like that, this movie doesn't get made without you, but we want to make it as good as possible. And I just hope that you guys love this movie as much as I love it and want to see it as much as I want to have you see it. So please help, and thank you for helping. I appreciate it tremendously.
No, that is great. No, that was very, very well said. So thank you so much, Mike, for coming on here and pouring your heart out for us. And I wish you all the best of luck in making this movie, chainsawing some intestines, and making amazing things happen so that we get to enjoy it all with you, and, you know, becoming part of your city and the hills and enjoying your pain through our own.
I love that. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.